Welcome everyone. Today we are here to have another exciting talk as part of our emerging platform society series. We are joined by Professor Kaun from Sweden, and I think there are some really interesting possibilities of the participation or the intervention by the state in these platform societies that she's going to talk us through today. So over to you, Anne. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today and also approach a topic that I've been working on for quite some time now, namely automated decision making and in the public administration from a slightly different perspective than I have done before. So it was really inspiring to prepare this talk for today. I'm a professor in media and communication studies, so it's also a very specific angle on automated decision making, but also platformization of society. And as you've probably discussed and heard in the previous presentations as well, when we think of the platformization of society, we often think about how the world is connected by commercial big platforms that are penetrating the heart of society, that are affecting institutions, economic transactions, social and cultural practices, but also they are kind of forcing governments to act and states to act upon these emerging platforms that take a real center stage in society. And in that sense, there have been attempts to talk about the governance of platforms, of course. What kind of laws and regulations do we need in order to control and maybe make platforms more transparent, that come with specific principles and dynamics that I'm here listed based on Jose van Dijk, De Waal, and Thomas Pöl's a very essential reading if we're interested in platforms, of course, who wrote about the platform society. And they talk about platforms in terms of principles that are concerning the capturing of data, of course, by users, not only end users, but also between different companies sharing data that are captured by platforms, in terms of circulation of content and data, but also the commodification of all aspects of our lives that are made possible by these commercial platforms. And then, of course, they are also about selection. They're about selecting specific content that we are engaging with, or certain practices that we are engaging with more. And then they are also, what they are proposing in the book, built around specific dynamics, namely the personalization, the focus on the individual user, with a focus on reputation and trends. So we as users in platforms, but also those who offer services, for example, in online platforms, are ranked and evaluated based on reviews, and hence it's about this gaining reputation and scores within these platforms. But platforms have also a central role in moderating the content that is coming into these platforms. So these are the principles that they are suggesting. And then they identify, of course, certain areas where we can see these principles and dynamics playing out. They are talking about the educational sector. They are talking about Airbnb as a very central platform for housing and replacing dominant hotel chains increasingly. But they are also talking about health applications, so more sectoral applications rather than the big commercial platforms that we often talk about here, like Airbnb, but also Facebook and other social media as platforms. So they are also already branching out. And I found it very inspiring to use this idea of platformization, that there are new principles and dynamics that are characterizing our societies, to think about the platformization of welfare provision. And here my starting point is really that we can see an increased proliferation and use of algorithmic automation in public services, in public administration. And there are some signs that are suggesting that we can see a turn towards the digital welfare state and the algorithmic welfare state in many ways. And there we can ask, do these automation processes follow similar principles as the platformization that we have seen in other areas, as, for example, Airbnb is doing for the accommodation sector, or certain learning platforms are doing in the educational sector? So how can we use these principles that have been identified before in order to talk about the automation within welfare provision? And there are a couple of reports that are mapping out where we can see increased algorithmic automation. I put one picture here, the Automating Society report by Algorithm Watch. It's the follow-up. They published a first one in 2019, and they continuously map these kind of initiatives and bring examples of, for example, in the UK, the universal income scoring or citizen scoring, algorithmic sorting in the Austrian employment services. We also know other examples in the Indian society, for example, where we also can see these kind of attempts towards the digital welfare provision. There are also a number of other mapping initiatives that one would like to really contribute to making transparent where these kind of processes are happening, with the argument that we as citizens need to know where automation is happening. This is not always apparent to us. And also, if we think of platforms more in general, there are oftentimes is this problem of black boxing and not having access to how these platforms are working, how they are actually capturing data. And the same goes for the automation process in the welfare provision. So there have been attempts, for example, besides this Algorithm Watch reports, there are also registers by, for example, the city of Helsinki, which is listing all automated decision-making in public services within the city. But also the city of Amsterdam has made an attempt towards this algorithmic register. And it's also been increasingly pointed out that this question of the digital welfare state is also a question that has democratic implications, that there are changes and transformations happening that have really fundamental implications for the citizens. They are directly affected by the digitization and the platformization of welfare provision. And the UN Special Rapporteur report in 2019 is really highlighting this aspect as well, where we need more discussion, where we need more transparency, and also potentially more regulation. And this is highlighted in this report. But I also want to emphasize, and I'm bringing here a picture from 1956, that the automation of public administration is all but new. So with the early attempts, the first computers that were emerging, there was this idea of automating public administration. That's here illustrated in a German newspaper that then was republished in the Swedish context. And here I've also written, or I'm just about finalizing an article writing about this historical representations of automation in the public sector. This has been also going on and continues further into the 1980s. Here's a depiction of the social insurance in Sweden, where we as citizens are disappearing in the computer, in the calculating system, and become this kind of robots. So there is a strong critique already in the 1980s towards this computerization and digitization of public administration going on. But I want to emphasize that the transformation that we are seeing now, also because it is embedded in the broader platformization of society, is at an accelerated level. It's at much faster pace, and it's also the possibilities of automating are far more increased at the moment. So it's a different scale of how automation is possible at the moment. And just to bring you some example of the extent of automation, There has been a report by the Swedish National Audit Office that has been mapping automated decision-making in the public sector in Sweden. And they also take a long historical perspective and go back to the 1970s, where the first computers were introduced in public administration, and already then speak of automated decision-making. And they have investigated 13 agencies in Sweden that made over 140 million decisions affecting private persons or companies directly in 2019. So it's a quite high number, just this like in absolute terms. And also the number of fully automated decisions is quite high, with more than 120 million decisions. And some of the most automated public agencies are the insurance agency, the tax agency, and the transport agency, which have amount to 80% of all the automated decisions in their work, in their daily work. But what do we speak about when we talk about automated decision making, actually? So, and there's a lot of confusion in terms of terminology. I'm using the definition that automated decision making relies on algorithmic systems. And here we could replace digital algorithmic systems with platforms to issue a decision. And these algorithmic systems can look differently. Sometimes these are rather simple decision trees. It's robotic process automation, where no prediction or predictive scores are assigned. And which we could also call some forms of weak AI. There are, however, also pilot projects working with machine learning on, for example, natural language processing in order to detect certain patterns in submitted applications, or, for example, reports about child abuse in families. There was one pilot study in a municipality close to Stockholm working with machine learning. So we have a whole range of different digital algorithmic systems that are used in order to automate decision making. And this is, of course, also embedded in a broader attempt to digitize the welfare state, which also includes increasingly having exchanges and access to public administration through digital e-platforms by the citizens, where you self-report, where you submit your applications, where you don't have direct exchange with civil servants anymore, any longer. So this is like the broader context, the digitization. And this has, of course, been also sped up by the pandemic, where a lot of services have been forced to move from physical exchanges and meetings into the digital realm. And then, of course, we have, as I said, also more advanced system like predictive algorithms. I mentioned one example from Sweden already, but there have also been similar attempts in Denmark. Both cases, the Danish and the Swedish case, haven't been realized because there were concerns on the one hand by the public. And in the Swedish case, it turned out that the methods that would be used and the machine learning, the data that would be used to train the machine learning algorithm, this would violate rules and regulations of data use at the current moment. The municipality, however, is arguing that they are well prepared once they have the legal grounds, so they can directly introduce the system. So they are still standing behind the system that they have developed and have been testing in the field as well. And this is also one important aspect before I turn to a more specific example to illustrate a little bit further algorithmic decision-making in the Swedish context, is the legal framework that we are moving in, really in a gray zone here. And a lot of public agencies and also on the municipal level are testing the borders. They're moving in the gray zones. They're interpreting existing regulations very broadly in order to automate decisions within within their daily work. But there are, of course, some legal frameworks in the Swedish context, for example, the Förvaltningslagen, which is a legal regulations for the public administration, and there a decision can be taken by a decision maker and responsible alone. So it has to be, it shouldn't be fully automated, but automated support systems are included now. And then there are also, of course, references in the GDPR on the European level, and often the Article 22 is cited here, that the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing, including profiling, which produces legal effects concerning him or her, or similar significant affects him or her. Yes. So here we have the right actually to request a human decision maker on all applications or processes that have a direct effect on us. So this is the legal kind of framework for it. In Sweden, on the municipal level, as I said before, decisions can be automated but must be approved by a civil servant. So in the end, the accountability lies with a human and the agency. And in this year in March, there was just published a governmental inquiry that was investigating the legal grounds for this automated decision making, and also suggested some adjustments in the legal frameworks. What I'm interested in here is to look into one specific case which gained quite some attention in the Swedish context and was controversially discussed as a way to see how this platformization of the welfare state is legitimated. How is it made sense of by different actors within the public sphere, and the ones who are driving, who are pushing this automation process? And how are they making sense of these complex platforms and technical systems? And here I use the notion of Mundanization, which is drawing also a little bit on the domestication of technology, very well established thesis within STS and media and communication studies, how we are integrating complex technical systems into our everyday lives by highlighting certain aspects while ignoring others. So we rarely fully understand our laptops and smartphones, but of course we understand certain features, that those that make sense for us, that are meaningful to us. And we are mitigating and forgetting other features that are hidden or that are too complex for us to understand. And I'm arguing here that part of the legitimation process, that is also mundanization and domestication of technology, is defining and really saying what automated decision making is, what it does, and what the consequences are in the public sector. The case I'm drawing on is the so-called Trelleborg model, which was the first case of fully automated decision-making on social benefit applications in one municipality in Sweden. And they were really a role model, and early on in this process already introducing fully automated decision-making in 2017. Trelleborg is a municipality in southern Sweden with 46,000 residents. And they introduced a rule-based algorithm as a decision support system, as they call it, rather than a fully automated robot, but the decision support system that kind of processes incoming applications for social benefits. With the help of robotic process automation. In the process of automating, they've reduced the civil servants from 11 to 3 civil servants who are caseworkers working with these kind of applications. And they also reduced the number of welfare recipients. And this is presented as a big success because the municipality argues, okay, the ones who disappeared from the welfare, from receiving social benefits, they re-entered the job market, but they can actually, they are not sure. Or it could also be that the digitization, making this process mainly available through e-services, constitutes a larger threshold for certain groups that are not applying for social benefits anymore. But they can't really answer to this, but these are the outcomes of the automation process. So how are they making sense of automated decision making? How is this technology mundanized, the platformization of welfare provision? So if you email with the municipality, you might receive an answer including this email signature, which reads, when the robots take care of the processing, the municipality takes care of the citizens. And it also has this nice heart-shaped cloud there. So this is the main argument for why we need to automate, because the automation allows to get rid of tasks that are repetitive, that are time-consuming, and frees time of the civil servants, of the caseworkers, to focus really on the humans, to engage with questions of how they can re-enter the job market and develop individualized programs for the job seekers or for those receiving social benefits. Then if we return to this question of how they are legitimating, but also defining automated decision-making, what it actually is, this is the definition of the unit manager at the municipality, saying, so what is automated decision-making actually? This is the question. In our process, when we refer to social benefits, this is mainly a question whether you are available for the job market or not. And the evaluation of this question, this decision, if you're available or not, is taken in the job market process by a civil servant. And then this decision is taken to a higher organizational level and becomes part of the decision by the public agency. So in that sense, we never fully automated decisions. So while the applications for the social benefits that have to be submitted every month, resubmitted every month, and have to include updates on potential incomes by the applicants, these incoming applications are fully automatically processed. But the municipality argues this is part of a larger decision. So we never fully automated decisions. It's a larger question. It's namely the question whether you can re-enter the job market or not. And the answer to this question always lies with the caseworker, with the civil servant. So this is again a way of kind of moving within the gray zone and encompassing the processing, the automated processing of social benefit applications into a larger decision process. And in that sense saying, we are using decision support systems and not fully automated systems. But as I said, the case gained quite some attention, not only because 19 other municipalities introduced or attempted to introduce similar automated decision-making platforms, but also by the public. So journalists started to investigate the process of automation in Trelleborg and wanted to gain access to the source code of the software. So here the journalist defined automated decision-making and the kind of platformization of social benefit provision as the source code of software that he wanted to investigate. Trelleborg themselves, the municipality, argued that this shouldn't be part of the access to public records, which is really safeguarded by the law in Sweden. So here you have the right to access a lot of public records and data. This ranges from email exchanges to specific other reports, internal reports of public institutions. And the journalist would argue the source code is part of public records and hence should be released to the public. Trelleborg argued, no, it's a software, it's a product. So it shouldn't be encompassed in this definition of public records. So here the journalist went to the Court of Appeal, and the court ruled that, and I'm reading now the quote from the ruling, the software was developed for the specific needs of the municipality who now owns it. It is hence not a licensed software product that is still owned by a commercial company that has the software at its disposal for commercial interests. Furthermore, the court has reached the opinion that no individuals will be harmed if the source code is shared with Frederick Rummel, that's the journalist, as requested. Hence, the appeal should be allowed. So in consequence, they argue, okay, because the municipality owns it, it's not an off-shelf product. They bought or they hired a coding company that produced the software, and they are owning the software. And for that reason, it becomes part of public records. It's not a commercial product anymore, and the commercial company wouldn't be hurt in their commercial interest if the source code was released. So in the end, the journalists got access to the source code. Unfortunately, the coding company didn't remove sensitive data, and data on citizens was released together with the source code. So that's also an interesting development. But here, the main point is that automated decision-making and the definition of what platformization of welfare provision is was given as a source code, and we need access to the source code in order to understand how decisions are made. The next litigation case is that the automated decision making was defined, or the platformization was defined as a decision tree and an interface. What does it mean? The Union for Professionals, SSR, which is a union for civil servants, those people who are working in public agencies, mainly, they argued we need to have a broader understanding how and meaningful information on how decisions are made within municipalities. And so we need to see the decision tree. How is the application that is incoming for social benefits processed by the system? And we also want to see the interface that the civil servants are interacting with as part of how we can gain an understanding, the explainability of decision making. And they had several meetings with Trelleborg municipality, the union, in order to gain this access, but they never received the materials that they had requested. And so they went to the parliamentary ombudsman and made a report there. As of last week, there was no reply yet, but they were interested basically in getting access. This is the decision tree. I know that it's very not very clear picture, but this is only to illustrate what they wanted to gain access to as part of the definition what meaningful information is in automated decision making. To conclude and to transition into the Q&A session, what I've wanted to illustrate is that we have also different actors than the big five of platformization that we are usually are talking about when we think of the platformization of society, that there are other actors that are currently driving the platformization of welfare, and that we need to look into these actors as well. There are certain software packages that are always returning, and similar actors and components that are used by different municipalities and public agencies. So these are kind of the hidden platforms that we also need to investigate, because they have direct implications for the citizens in their everyday lives and how decisions for their welfare are being made. What I also wanted to illustrate is that the automation and platformization of welfare provision is often legitimized with the arguments of efficiency. We are getting faster and more effective decision making, but also they are fairer because we humans are often unfair and biased. And algorithms are not making these kind of biased decisions as we are doing. So there we also have these kind of legitimization claims that we might recognize from platform discussions as well. And also I wanted to highlight the role of defining what platformization and automation of welfare is and what it does as a part of integrating these systems into our everyday lives and making sense of them. But that's so far my presentation, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Anne. That was a really wonderful presentation, and really it brought up a lot of talking points, not the least of which is what is the public, in the context of the cases that you've been discussing. But I think maybe I can invite Pier Giorgio if he has any questions to start with, and then we will move on to the others in the audience.
Thank you, Gillette. Thank you, Anne, for your super interesting presentation. Listening to your talk arose in my mind a couple of questions. Firstly, I would like to come back to the Weberian notion of efficiency and basically the idea of digitally streamlining bureaucratic process, any kind of bureaucratic process, basically is the perfection of the modern idea of efficiency. And I think you nailed a great point when you said that this is under the, let's say, imaginario of doing that in order to assure more equality process. And basically, if we wish to use the richer words, avoiding any human error or any human interference into the process. But meanwhile, there is also a big issue that is digital exclusion. Digital exclusion, it's, or at least during COVID-19, as you emphasized, COVID-19 has been a catalyzer of the process of digitalization worldwide. Even in Italy, we had all this transition into what we call SIPD, that is the official governmental email or credential of access to digital platform, but this process left aside a lot of citizens. I mean, it wasn't equal at all because, like digital divide is an issue, or at least in our context is an issue. So I think we as sociologists, activists, influencers have to do more to address this issue in general, because there are a lot of people that are marginalized way more than in normal administrative process, let's say. And this is one point, and a very conclusion note. Sorry if I'm going too wide, too broad in this reflection, is connected to again the fact that I mean, this is a process that is inevitable. The idea of going toward this direction of streamlining efficiency, and well, again, probably we have to stress more the issue related to digital equality, and those are excluded for so many kind of reasons. In let's say in the physical society, at least some of these things are somehow evident. The risk in the process, in the total digitalized process, is that the marginalized will be even more marginalized because they are completely invisible. That's it. Thank you very much for your.
Yeah, thank you. Should I react directly? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That were great remarks. And maybe I start with the Weber comment and the algorithm as the kind of perfect bureaucrat. And that's totally true. And people, civil servants that I've interviewed in different municipalities, they often also said, well, that's just like the natural continuation of the idea of us as civil servants. We are supposed to be robots. We are supposed to follow algorithms and rules, and we are supposed to always use the same rules, independently from who is sitting in front of us. So that's, I mean, they are not surprised. It's just like the natural process continuation of what the idea of the bureaucrat is already. But what I think is then, I mean, we are discussing the black boxing of algorithms and what kind of transparency do we need in order to be and have the literacy as citizens to engage in the platformization process and these kind of questions. And so we could also ask, like, maybe it's about time to open the bureaucratic black box as well. And it's not about, making transparent all the decisions, but like generally that citizens gain transparency about meaningful information about how this decision on their applications were made. So this is maybe a moment to also rethink the state in that sense and open this black box. And then the second point on the digital exclusion aspect, this is of course crucial, like not only in terms of sheer numbers. Also Sweden, I mean, Sweden is considered as one of the most digitized societies, and there have been like this kind of e-services at hand for a long time, but you still have up to 1 million people who almost never use the internet. And I mean, the public agencies, they are supposed to offer the same service to these kind of people as well. And there have been governmental inquiries that show that the processing of those applications are far slower. And the service is not the same if you're one of those disconnected citizens. So there is this exclusionary aspect definitely given. And it's not only that it's the older generation that slowly disappears because they are dying away or whatever, but there are also other groups within society that are not using certain platforms for diverse reasons, for socioeconomic reasons, but also there are questions of trust. And there are questions of literacy, but also there are cognitive disabled people who are not able to access platforms and understand the information that is required from them. So in that sense, there are different forms of digital exclusion that we need to consider here. And it's not only literacy and skills, but it's also a whole infrastructure that is disappearing. And one other aspect that I would like to highlight in this context is also in Sweden, part of the civil servant education is that they understand, they have very strong democratic values as part of their education. They see themselves as mediators between the state and the citizens. So this link, if you're not meeting civil servants anymore, this link between the state and the citizen, this relationship is also fundamentally changing if this is fully automated and digitized, where you serve yourself all the time as a citizen. You go into platforms, you enter your information, you get automatic replies, but you never directly interact with the same person. And for certain groups in society, this is an advantage because it speeds up decisions. You don't have to wait for decisions as long anymore. But for other groups, this increases the threshold of being able to trust public institutions, newcomers, but also people who are going through the correction system, people who have really low trust in public institutions. For them, it is really difficult to build trust if you're interacting with the state through digital platforms. So this is also part of digital exclusion that we not often talk about, but that's very, very important, I think.
Thank you very much, Anne. Gillette, may I jump in with another quick and brief comment? Sorry, but I just forgot it before. And like when you talked about algorithm, Anne, you talked basically as a perfect system, but we know that algorithm also have bias sometimes. And so have you ever had in your research evidence about algorithm bias, or basically these meant as a political tools also, because basically they are not always neutral. That's opening the black box is very important, as you said.
Yeah, definitely. So as I tried to say in the beginning, like most of the algorithmic systems that are used are this kind of forms of weak AI. So it's not a lot of machine learning and advanced systems that are used at the moment, but of course, so the question of bias is maybe a slightly different one here. So, but there are errors still. Like there was one big scandal with the employment services that are also kind of issuing benefits for unemployed, where you also submit activity reports every second week. And these activity reports are processed automatically, usually as well. And then it turned out one of the servers wasn't functioning fully. So they were suspecting that up to 30,000 decisions were issued wrongly. Like there were denials, or the incoming report wasn't registered, which means that the applicant is not eligible for the specific benefit that they would be receiving. And it took them more than half a year to actually find the error. So this is also because you're automating, and you are processing a high scale of applications, it takes a lot of time to then backtrack errors. It's not really about the bias and these kind of questions, but it's about technological error in the system that can happen all the time. And then you don't have the civil servants to actually manual process in the meantime while you're investigating the technological infrastructure to manually process the application. So that was a big issue for the agency. In the end, it wasn't so many applications that actually were denied benefits. So in the end, it was slightly below 1,000 decisions that were issued wrongly. But anyway, I mean, they suspected more than 30,000 false decisions. So this is definitely also an aspect that needs to be considered.
Thank you very much indeed.
And I thought, when I was listening to your talk, I mean, because I think you also mentioned the Indian case, we just have so many developments on that front. I was struck by how much similarity we see. So for instance, when you mentioned that the legitimation claim is through faster and fairer provision of welfare, those are very familiar words and principles to us in India. But I was actually thinking, what I really liked about your talk was you showed us this interaction between the algorithmic system and the human system. And there is, I think, so much more to uncover there. For instance, one of my students who's actually with us today is looking into the question of how creditworthiness is determined. Through a combination of algorithmic as well as human intervention, and that intervention comes from the state. So if you could speak to that a little bit more, if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, in the Trelleborg case, I was talking about fully automated decisions. So there's a civil servant could go into the system and revoke a decision that the algorithm was making. But a lot of the decisions are support systems. So you might get people who are signing up for unemployment benefits or register themselves as unemployed, that they are sorted into different groups automatically based on the information that they are giving, like the certificates they are having, the length of education, where they are living. And based on that, they are sorted into different groups automatically and then might receive specific training or programs that they are following based on this sorting. And the civil servant could, of course, go against the sorting decision by the algorithmic system. But there has been research showing that they rarely do, because you have to motivate. Why would you make another decision? Why would you not use the score or the sorting that's provided by the system? Then you need to make an effort to provide this argument for doing so. So even if then the official presentation is that it's the civil servant who is the accountable one in the end and who makes the final decision and can always go, there is room for navigation, there's room for changing the decision. They rarely do. In like less than 30% of the cases they would do and go against the decision made by the algorithm, because then you need to motivate it and justify it.
Sorry to interrupt, but exactly, I mean, I really loved your intervention of, using this as a mirror to look back at this black box of bureaucracy, because we're so used to thinking of the algorithm as a black box, whereas this black box of the bureaucracy, and precisely this point of, the bureaucrat having to document, which becomes such a strong thing that holds you back from making that decision. I was also thinking in terms of another intersection where I know that you have been focusing on the platformitization of the welfare state, and here it is primarily government officials and I'm sure other actors in the state. But I was also thinking of contexts like India, where increasingly in the provision of welfare, you have this intersection between the public and the private. So the often the accepted model is that you have, because I think one issue that comes up in discussion on platforms is we either think, we're looking for heroes and villains, right? So which is the larger hero? Is it the state? Which is the larger villain? Is it the big five? But in cases like India, you see this very hand in glove movement between the private companies or the state or the NGOs, in fact, which I think is something that needs more attention.
Yeah, definitely. So what I've been looking into more specifically also is the correction sector. It might sound a bit off from the welfare provision aspects, but I've been looking into like smart prison initiatives and the digitization of prisons, and their administration is one aspect. And I've attended, for example, like this kind of tech summits and tech fairs specifically for the correction sector. And there you can really see this trope emerging of corrections are so far behind. They are so far removed from the technological development. They really need to pick up speed, and they have to pick up very fast. So there is it's this discourse of public administration is behind in the development, and we need public-private partnerships to reach the contemporary level of technological advancement. So there are also, you often see this kind of very under the radar pilot projects that don't get any attention because it's a small scale pilot, and there we are working together with private companies and provide these solutions from the private sector. But I think it is really this kind of aura of presenting the state and public administration as lagging behind. And that is why we need the private sector there, and we need to make these decisions fast. Like, it's crucial. It has to happen now. And this is really, really clear when you go to these kind of tech summits where they try to, their colleagues in Denmark, and they have talked about this as like producing hot air that they're trying to sell into the public sector at these tech companies. And it's also, I mean, if you can add a technological twist to public administration, you also attract more applicants as civil servants. In Sweden, they have really problems recruiting people into public administration and staying on the job. And if you can put some kind of tech label on it, it also becomes cool and more attractive. So the prison and probation services, for example, they have their own tech lab now, crime tech. So you see, so it's also this kind of trying to lift the attractiveness of working within the public sector as well. And I mean, another example that I find also interesting, the digital identification card or system that we're using in Sweden for almost all platforms, even if you buy a train ticket, you need it now, is provided by a private bank.
Apologies. Sorry, if you could just give us a little bit of a context. What does that card look like? And
well, it's not a physical card, but it's like a digital ID that you download as an application on your phone or on your laptop, and then with a code you can identify yourself. And if you buy online, if you sign up for public administration agent or public agencies to the employment services, you need this ID card, or not card, but the application. And this is provided by a bank or a banking consortium. So it's from the private sector. And when this decision was made, there were different actors applying. Also, public agency was applying to provide this ID, this digital ID, but it went to the banking sector because they said it's a trusted institution in the society, and people already trust with online work there, and also that they have the necessary digital infrastructure in order to provide it. So that's another aspect that's or example of this kind of public-private collaboration.
I think we have a question coming
your
in.
Question.
Go ahead. Kalpesh, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. So, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, and for an insightful talk. So I have a question regarding the creditworthiness that Professor Sam just talked about. So in the context of India, what I have been observing is that, so when we talk about, like, when I've explored about the creditworthiness in the context of microfinance women, it is basically like I have seen the helplessness among women, that even if they are approaching one microfinance or finance company, it's like their inquiries are also recorded, but they don't know. And hence, the more they approach different financial institutions, and when, like, if there is one company who wants to give a loan, then they will also see that, okay, there are a lot of inquiries that these clients have made, and their loans have been rejected. So, what I have been seeing is that the people are trying to maintain their relationship with one financial institution or two financial institutions in order to get a loan from other institution in future. So even if they are approaching one financial institution for the loan, they are very careful that they will get a loan from that institution. So how do you see this helplessness among people when it comes to, like, this interaction with the algorithms?
Mm. I mean, I think there are two aspects in your questions that are quite important and very interesting and need more attention. So firstly, it is this, I wouldn't call it like helplessness, but I think what you mentioned is also that they have agency. They decide then, based on the previous experience, okay, my requests or my applications are rejected, so I have to have another strategy. They are not directly gaming the algorithm, but they are making, also trying to make sense of how does it work, and then they develop a strategy of how to make the system work for them. So you could also see it as a form of agency and developing this maybe like soft forms of resistance, or trying to find ways around in the system, or repairing the system. I've written an article with Julia Velkova on algorithmic resistance, and we talk about it in terms of repairing the algorithm, making small practices and trying to change small things to make it work for you. So this is one aspect. And the other aspect is related to the question that decisions that are made in algorithmic systems and based on data, they are based on historical, like previous practices, previous decisions. And in a way, if we are not only taking, but credit system is a very good example for that the decisions are based on historical data. It is kind of manifesting your social position. So the possibilities for change or moving from the position where you're in at the moment are kind of reduced if it's always your historical package that is making the future decision, or on which the future decision is based as well. So this is another aspect that's important when we think about decision making based on these kind of historical data and models of thinking. Okay, if you're living in this area, if you have this gender, if you have this kind of educational background and family background, then your chances of moving into another social position is even further reduced, because the algorithm is just confirming, your positionality in that sense. So this is an aspect that might also, or that has been discussed, like in how far social mobility is constrained by these kind of data-based algorithmic systems.
I just have one more, like, small question.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about this, like, I've been speaking to people from fintech, and so they are saying that in the context of rural India, there is a so the people are gaining trust over the fintech. So, like, so that is their comment. But when I'm thinking about fintech, then, like, what do you think? Is it the question of trust or is it the question of choice? Because when I see the like the urban context, people are like that, so that they have to make this choice that, okay, they need to participate, they need to use this Google Pay or any other platforms to access certain services. But when it comes to rural area, there are already existing infrastructure from where they can access the services. So is it about the trust or is it about the choices that are available?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a very important question, and it depends. I mean, if you if you don't have a choice, so it's maybe you don't even trust the system, but if you can't do the things that you need to do only by using a certain platform, I mean, what do you do? And I mean, Joe Turow in the States and Noah Draper, they're talking about digital resignation, like in the context of surveillance. Like, we are all aware that we are tracked in social media platforms. We are all aware that a lot of data are collected, but we gain a lot as well, and we kind of resignate. We accept it. It's this kind of, okay, it's a digital resignation. I can't do anything about the large-scale surveillance and the tracking, but I still want to use the systems. And I'm kind of also forced to do it, to remain in my social networks, to remain connected in certain ways. So they talk about digital resignation, which might resonate with the thought that you are having as well.
Let's see if there are some other questions. Thank you. I thought that was such an important aspect, that the point about being resigned to actually being part of these systems, and then how do you negotiate whether we can even look for resistance there. I think we have another question from Rajarshi. Yes, Rajarshi, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Anne, for that insightful talk. I would just like to make one comment, is that when we were thinking about this, when you use this term as Mundanization, that it almost becomes a mundane affair. So we already know that due to the user practices with internet and devices, things become already invisible, right, for the common public, because they're so common in use. So I think that is something that is being at least tried out from the state side or even from the private sector, that you make algorithms not only a black box, but as if it is invisible within this human agency. So I would like to have your comments on that. And the other thing is that very recently, Indian government actually released a report. It's called AI for All. And they exactly talk about the sectors that you have been talking about, insurance, transportation, and everything. And they are talking about who should regulate this. This is a question that the government is asking now. And so it's very interesting how it develops now from there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's super interesting. I would definitely look up the report. Thank you for the tip. Yes, in terms of the Mundanization, I think I completely agree with you. Like most of the designs in applications and platforms, it's about the smoothness of the experience, that there are no kind of breaks or glitches, or so that it kind of integrates easily into your everyday experience. But the point with the Mundanization experience, or the process of Mundanization, is as well that technology becomes everyday when you don't think about it anymore, like when it's completely in the background. And it's a little bit like Mark Durst is talking about media life. It's not only digital media, but media in general, that media have become like water to the fish, and we don't even notice it anymore. So in a similar way, it's interesting to follow the process of Mundanization with automated decision making, because it's happening at the moment. And I mean, the litigation cases are two examples where it's not just accepted, but where public actors are trying to make interventions and trying to redefine the process, make it transparent in a way. So in that sense, it hasn't become fully mundane. It hasn't completely become background to our everyday lives yet, but it is an ongoing process. And this negotiation process is interesting to follow. At least I think it's important to do so. Thank you. It was very good remarks.
Okay. Thank you very much. And if I'm not wrong, you have another appointment in minutes. We've been delighted of having you with us, and we really wish and hope to get in touch with you pretty soon to develop further comment and eventually find a stream of research together. Really appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I also want to learn more about your collaboration between Italy and India. It sounds very amazing. Yeah.
We should just set up a meeting and, just bounce a few ideas off, because I think there is a lot that we have in common. They could take it in many directions, I feel.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.